So when we talk about recognizing patterns, we want to start looking at what's happening in your brain. Because the minute that you can understand what's happening in your brain, you can get to grips with what it is that you need to be changing. So the first thing that you want to become aware of is that everything that's coming into your brain is coming in via senses. Okay? Your smell, your taste, your sight, your hearing, and touch. Am I right? That there's no other way that anything comes in through into your brain. So it comes in via stimuli. Okay? That's point number one. It goes into the brain to a part of the brain that's called the thalamus. Now don't get caught up on these big brain words. It's not important. It's more important for you to understand the sequence of where it's going so that you can understand what's going on in your brain. This is what we call the air traffic controller. Okay? That's point number two. The air traffic controller sends a message through to your limbic system, which is your emotional boss. Okay? And inside your emotional boss, in your limbic system, is a place called the amygdala. And for you, in terms of moving forward, you can call it Amy. Let Amy become a friendly word to you so that you can have conversations around Amy and where she takes you and why she takes you there. Because you want to understand what's going on in your amygdala, okay? And together with the amygdala is a very close friend called the hippocampus. Now let's break those open for you so that we can actually understand what those areas in your brains are. So the amygdala is commonly known as your 911 response center. We call it your 911 response center because it's there to protect you. It is there to look after you. If you are driving down the road and a buck jumps in front of you, and Amy is going to automatically give you the reaction, the fast reaction within split seconds to slam on brakes. Lutando, when you're driving, no, I know you're with me, when you're driving that car, Amy's going to save you from knocking over that dog that runs in front of your truck. So you slam on brakes, and Amy's done her job. So she's responsible for flight, fright, and freeze responses. Now, if you think about your life and you start to think about the patterns that you get into, some of us walk away from conflict. Yes, we avoid it. Some of us go into fight mode around conflict, don't we? We go in for the jugular. We go in, we move towards it, we want to fight it. In other situations, we freeze. In other words, we become quite passive in the conversation. So you want to be aware of what are some of your responses to various things that happen in your life. Now, Amy doesn't do that work all on her own. She has a very, very close relationship with your hippocampus, which is your librarian. And in your librarian are all the thousands of files in your life, in your subconscious brain, of all the life's experiences, traumas, pain, love, all the fabulous things that have happened to you are all stored in these files. So what happens is it comes through stimuli, goes to the thalamus, sends it through to the limbic system. Limbic system checks in with Amy and says, won't you please quickly check in Lutando's file to see if there's anything that I need to protect him about around the situation. Checks in, goes through the files. Oops, yes, here's something that looks very similar. Careful, here's a little bit of warning for us. This has happened in his life before, we need to protect him. Then what happens is Amy responds and she sends through a signal to the prefrontal cortex, which is your executive brain, to make the decisions on your behalf. And that is the process. So it's 4, 5, and then that's a 6. Now we need to talk a little bit more about these brains. Amy is not a fully formed brain. We call her a reptilian brain. And the reason why she's called a reptilian brain is because she shows up irrationally. She doesn't always respond maturely on your behalf. When Amy responds, and it's not in a specific crisis situation in your life, it can be in reactive ways that make you show up like the child in the room. It's also where your distrust lobe is. So if you are in any relationship, no matter where you are in life, and you don't trust it, you're going to be responding from Amy. Now listen, this is a very important part. Because when she sends the signal through, once she's checked in with your hippocampus, she sends information through here. This is the brain that is rational. It is mature. It is responsible for good, healthy decision making because of the way that it's able to process information. Process the information from your emotions, your heart, as well as your head. What happens though is that when Amy checks in through into the hippocampus, she goes through these files, and that is why it is so important to ensure that some of the things that have happened in your life are settled within you. Because if there's any hurt or trauma down here, or past experiences that you still get triggered by, we call it being triggered by it, revved, or hooked, which means that somebody says something and it pulls you into the dramas. It makes you become reactive or respond in ways that are not necessarily helpful for you. So it's important to make sure that you've settled this stuff. That doesn't mean that you're not going to go through stuff, but it's to be able to ensure that you've healed yourself or restored relationships and worked with things or made peace with it. What happens is when this process goes across, it's very healthy. But what happens a lot of the time is that this process is cut off. And we call it an amygdala hijack. It is when your natural flow of how you were designed to function gets cut off. And you do not respond from your rational brain anymore. You respond from your reptilian brain. Are there any questions thus far? So far, so good. There is also limbic fluid that runs through from your limbic system that has got pockets of memory throughout your system. Okay? So that's why when we talk about your physical intelligence, we start to bring the body into it as well. We spoke earlier about when you're fearful, when you go for an interview, how you get stomachache. Or when some of you are experiencing stress, you get headaches or tension in your backs or lower necks and what have you. Generally anything from your waistline up, you will feel in your body is normally stress related. So it's a good way for you to be able to understand what's going on inside of you. These pockets of memory need to be understood in terms of what was happening here, because these memory triggers are related to what your life experience is. So let's say, for argument's sake, you were in a relationship where you were betrayed by someone. Okay? So you got hurt. This part of your life says, beware of relationships. Men or women will hurt me. Yes? So that's a memory trigger for you. So the next relationship you go into, you will be ultra cautious. So when somebody does something that looks remotely like something that the last person did, you will more than likely be triggered by it. Which means that you will respond irrationally to it. Which means that you're not necessarily working with truth. Yes? So let's take a look at some of your patterns and let's relate it back to this, and let's see how that works for you, if it brings any further insight for you. Thanks.